2 is linear equations with 2 variables. Hey, focus for me. Okay, you've not seen this before. Linear equations with 2 variables. An equation in 2 variable form has something like 2x minus y equals 5. It's an equation with 2 variables. So there's an x, there's a y in this case. A solution is an ordered pair, an x and a y, that produces a true statement when the values of x and y are substituted into the equation. So when I substitute them in and solve, it will say 5 equals 5 or 12 equals 12 or whatever it is. Okay? It will create a true statement. So it says, tell whether the ordered pair is a solution of 2x minus y equals 5. What do I need to do? What do I need to do, Carter?
Put the 1 where the x is.
Yes.
And then put where -3, which then would actually be a 3.
So this is my x, this is my y. So I'm going to say 2 times 1 minus, just minus -3 equals 5. What's 2 times 1? 2. What is -3? Positive 3 equals 5. What's 2 plus 3?
5.
So does 5 equal 5?
Yes.
Yes. So is this ordered pair a solution?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. But you have to show me with work. Do you understand?
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's
What if it's like self-explanatory?
doesn't matter. I need algebraic work behind it.
Like that?
You have to show me with work. If I don't see work, I'm counting it wrong. Okay? Now, I want to know if 4, 7 is a solution point of 2x minus y equals 5. So I'm going to say 2 times what? 4. And then I'm going to say minus 7 equals 5. So what's 2 times 4?
8.
And then I have 8 minus 7 equals 5. What's 8 minus 7?
1.
Does 1 equal 5? No.
Wait.
Is
How do we get 8?
because you have to plug
2
4
times 4.
into the x and you plug 7 into the y. Okay? So when they're asking you if something is if the ordered pair is a solution, you're just plugging x and y in and you're solving. You know how to plug numbers into an equation and solve. Okay? But this time I have 2 variables instead of 1. Jason, you got a question? You just put your hand up for one. Okay. What?
A part, does that say yes or yes?
It says yes.
Yes.
It's cursive, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not good.
Okay. So then we get word problems off of this. Josh, stop pounding like drums. Josh, stop. Okay. The Hawaiian volcano, I don't know how you say that, Mauna Loa, I don't know, has erupted many times. In 1859, lava from the volcano traveled 32 miles to the Pacific Ocean at an average speed of 4 miles per hour. They want you to represent the distance in miles and t as hours. Hey, I need you to focus. Now, in the book, it gives us the equation, but I want to see if we can come up with an equation together. Okay? Let's see if we can use our brains and come up with an equation. How would I come up with an equation for this?
You would do
What am I trying to find? What's the total thing I'm trying to
whatever
find?
that 1,000 number is minus
No.
22. What's that number?
Hey, hey. 8th grade. Refocus. Refocus. Eyes up here. You need to figure this out. That's not a 1,000 number. That says in 1859. That's a date. In 1859, lava from the volcano traveled 32 miles to the Pacific Ocean at an average speed of 4 miles per hour. Okay? Stop talking, the two of you, right now. Shut your mouths and focus. No, you don't. Shut your mouth and focus. What?
You. See?
Maybe. I have a question. What are we trying to find? What do you think we're trying to find? We know that it travels 32 miles to the Pacific Ocean at an average speed of 4 miles per hour. Okay? Do you know how many hours it takes? No, but do you know how many miles it travels per hour? it travel?
4 miles.
4.
32 miles. So if I have 32 minus 4t, what does that equal? What's the other variable we have to work with?
The 5. D.
My distance. My distance equals the 32 miles minus 4 times the hours because I don't know. We'll get there.
It would be.
Okay? So then it wants us to make a table of solutions. Okay? Here's where you have to be patient in math. What, Josh? Can you wait till we're done with this so you don't get lost? Okay. So make a table of solutions. Okay? Make a table of solutions. This is where you have to have patience, and it just takes time. There's no way around it. When you make a table of solutions, you're going to plug numbers in for x or for t in this case, and you're going to get outputs for d or for y, okay? So I am going to plug in numbers to see what it is. I'm going to have to make a list of numbers. I'm going to plug in 0. Okay, I'm not going to plug negatives in today. Why am I not plugging negatives into this equation?
Because the starting number is a negative.
Because what?
It's above 0.
It's not gonna go negative.
Yeah, because I'm not going to have negative time or negative distance. Okay? So in this case, I don't have to plug any negative numbers in, but on equations like this, I might have to plug negatives in. Okay? Because I can have negative ordered pairs.
So for that one, we would have to make a table of solutions.
Maybe if it said it. On that one you didn't because you were checking points. Here you have to make a table. So I'm going to plug in 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay? These are my inputs right here, right? And my input, is it T or D in this case?
T.
T.
Is the input.
And my output is what?
D.
D. When I plug a 0 into this equation, you get D equals 32 minus 4 times 0. What's that come out to? D equals what?
32.
32. Good. Okay? So I plug that in here. When I plug 1 in, I get D equals 32 times minus 4 times 1. So I get what? 32 minus 4.
28.
Okay. When you plug in 2, you get D equals 32 minus 4 times 2. So what do you get as your solution?
24.
24.
This is 6.
And what happens when I plug in 3? D equals 32 minus
20. 20.
4 times 3, you get
20.
20. Now listen, you need to show me your work for inputting things. You are going to have a lot of work to show me on your homework from here on out. You show me your inputs and your outputs, you make my table for me, okay? So you get 0 equals, when I plug in a 0, I get 32. When I plug in 1, I get 28. When I plug in 2, I get 24. When I plug in 3, I get 20. Now, how long did it take the lava to reach the ocean? How can I figure that out from my equation?
You add them all up.
Okay, what did you say? Jason's right. What did you say it was? Okay, but I need work behind that.
But
You get 8.
Because he did this. He took the equation of D equals 32 minus 4t, right? And then he's going to solve. He's going to plug some stuff in and solve. If I plug in, now listen. When I plug in 0, I'm going to plug 0 into D in this case because I want to solve for t. Okay? If you want to solve for time, you plug in 0 to the distance. If you want to solve for the distance, you plug 0 into time. Okay? So if I plug 0 into the distance, I get 32 minus 4t. How do you solve this equation from there?
32
I need to get t
32
by itself.
plus 0.
It's just like when you
oh,
solve.
oh,
32
you
plus
plus
0.
minus 4.
Not minus
No,
four.
you add
32.
4.
32
You add
plus
4.
0.
I subtract 32, not plus. So then if no, it's not. If I subtract 32, now what do I have to do to get t?
8. Positive 8.
Positive. Divide by negative 4 and t equals
8.
It's 8.
8
Positive
what?
Hours.
Hours.
But when you looking at it, and it says it took.
I know, Jason, but you have to show me work.
It says 4 hours. 4 miles per hour.
Mhm.
What was the point of making a table?
The point of making a table is because they want to know what inputs and outputs are. So if it traveled for 0 hours, it travels 32 miles. At one, it's telling you the rate. When 1 hour passed, it traveled 28 miles. When 2 hours passed, it traveled only 24. When 3 miles passed, it only traveled 20. Or when 3 hours passed, it only traveled 20 miles so far. What, Emma?
How did you know to use zero?
Okay, here's why. Whenever you want to solve for one of the things, like let's say I want to solve for time. If I want to solve for time, I have to make the other variable 0. Okay? Because when the other variable's at 0 is when I will find my solution for my time. If I want to solve for distance, like how far it traveled total, I would plug 0 into t, and then I would know the distance was 32. So whatever you're trying to solve for, you plug 0 into the opposite one. Okay?
So we only have to have 3 inputs when we do the table.
Depends. In this case, I put 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But it depends. If it goes into the negatives, you might have to have 2 negatives, 0, and 2 positives. You might have to have more. Depends on what you're graphing and what it looks like. We're going to talk about that over here a little bit more. Okay? Then we're going to move into graphing. Okay? Graph. The set of points in a coordinate plane that represents all the solutions of the equation. All the solutions of the equation. Okay? A linear equation is an equation whose graph is a line. Okay? You would not believe how many people miss that in Algebra 2. Don't forget linear equals line. Now, it wants me to graph y equals 2x minus 1. Does anyone have an idea how I even graph that?
What? You have to make a graph. Oh.
Okay, let me tell you right now. You already know how to graph that. What do you usually do? What do you usually do when you graph a line? You find the what first? You find the y-intercept, and then you graph the
X.
no.
Axis.
Stop.
Axis.
No. Stop throwing out words. When you graph a linear function normally, you've done this before. What form is that in? Y equals 2x minus 1. What form is that in? Y equals what? Think. I need you to think.
I'm trying.
Y equals.
I'm trying to think, bro.
What's that 2 in front of the x? It's your what?
That's a. That's dope. That's your.
I know this.
My brain is taking so long.
Variable is X.
Yeah, X.
No.
Wait, does it start with an I?
No. Starts with an S.
I forgot.
Solution!
No.
Y'all.
How about the fact that that's in slope form? Y equals mx plus b.
What is that? Learn slow?
We did this earlier, didn't we?
No.
Okay.
I'm confused.
See,
I see 2 numbers, 2 letters. All I see.
When you have y equals 2x minus 1, that's in linear form. Okay? If it's not in y equals form, it's not set into linear form. You have to put it in y equals whatever before you can graph a line. Okay? When I go to graph a line, I am going to plug numbers into x and I'm going to get numbers out for y and plot those points and then graph a line through it. Okay? This is where you have to plug negatives and positives in. Okay? Because a line doesn't just go on the positive side, right? Okay? So I'm going to plug numbers in. If I were you, I would always plug in -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. It will give you enough to look at. Okay?
-1.
-2,
0.
-1, 0, 1, and 2. Let's plug these numbers into this equation. Okay? My input is my what?
X.
X. Input. My output is my what?
Y.
Okay. So if I plug a -2 in, that means I have y equals 2 times -2 minus 1. What's 2 times -2?
-4.
And what's -4 minus 1?
3.
No.
Negative
-4
5.
minus -5. So when I plug in a -2, I get a -5 out. Okay? Now I'm going to plug -1 in. Y equals 2 times -1 minus 1. 2 times -1 is -2, and minus 1 is
-3.
-3. Okay? I'm going to plug in a 0. Y equals 2 times 0 minus 1. What's that give me?
0 minus 1 would be 1.
Negative
Negative
1.
1.
Okay? Then I say y equals 2 times 1 minus 1. What's 2 times 1?
2.
Minus 1 is?
1.
So y equals 1. Then I say y equals 2 times 2 minus 1. What's 2 times 2?
4.
And 4 minus 1 is?
3.
Okay, listen. You need to show me all this work. You need to show me a table.
Do you have anything today?
What?
Do you have anything in Ava?
Yes, I do have a meeting.
Uh,
Now, from there, you have to graph these points. How do I graph negative 2, negative 5?
You do
Yes, Emma says
over
this way
negative
2 and
then down.
down. Okay? And then how do I graph negative 1, negative 3? Down, over 1, down 3. Then I graph 0, negative 1. Then I graph 1, 1. Then I graph 2, 3.
Wait, what?
Okay? Now, from there, this is what you will need to do on your homework. You will need to have a straight edge.
A what?
Straight edge. Okay? And you are going to play connect the dots.
This why it's called linear.
Yes, because it makes a line. Now remember that
What
my
if we
graph,
don't have a straight edge?
well, get one.
What if we
Well, I got no money.
Right.
Okay? And you have now graphed a linear function. Now, here's the deal.
This is straight edge.
You need to also do this. At the end, you need to have,
This is straight edge.
guys, at the end of your line, you need to have arrows on both sides. Because does my line stop through just those points? No, a line is going on forever. Okay? So I need to graph that and show that. So if I don't have arrows, I haven't graphed it right. Okay? Plug 2 negatives in, plug a 0 in, plug 2 positives in. Graph those points, connect the dots, and you've got your linear function. It's not hard, it takes time. You know how to do math. You know how to plug numbers in and solve. You know how to do that. Don't stress by what this looks like, okay? It just takes time. It's not hard. It's stuff you've done before. You've plugged numbers in all the time. We did numbers last chapter with those percent equations, right? You plug numbers into the percent and you figured out how much money you're making. But you don't. You can pick any number in the world you want to pick. But what I am telling you is just pick easy little numbers.
Wait,
Okay?
so
And
what
you stop and listen. I want you to pick negative numbers, 0, and 2 negatives, 0, and 2 positive numbers. Okay? It doesn't matter what numbers those are, but if I pick 20, I'm going to have a huge graph. And I would have to count by like 5s or something like that. Okay? So stick with negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2 if possible. Okay? Does that make sense? And then on like ones like this, use common sense. I don't have negative distances, so I don't need to plug any negative numbers in. Okay? Now, over here, graphing of the equation y equals b is a horizontal line through 0b. So here's the deal. If 0 is in my x spot, and I have a number in my y, I'm going to draw a horizontal line through that. Then I have a graph of an equation x equals a is the vertical line. So if there's a number in my x spot, but a 0 in my y, I'm going to have a vertical line. Okay? So how do you graph y equals 3? Where would I go?
Y equals 3.
Where do I go on the y-axis?
Vertical.
I go up 3. Now the line through this graphs this way. It literally just graphs a straight line like that.
So we don't have to make a table for that?
You don't have to make a table for that one. How do you graph x equals negative 2? No.
You go
left
vertical.
two.
X.
You go
You
vertical.
go left 2.
Left 2 and I'm going
Vertical.
vertical. Good. Okay? So when I have an x, I have a straight up and down line. When I have a y, I have a horizontal line. Because when I graph this point, what it's saying is there's a solution. Anytime I plug a number in, I'm getting 3 out for my y. If I plug 1 into this equation, okay, there is no x here, right? So I can't plug any x values into that to get y's out. Just like here, I can't plug any y values in to get x's out. It's just what it is. So if it says x equals and there's nothing else, it's a vertical line. If it says y equals and there's nothing else, it's a horizontal line. Okay? Now let's talk about this last one. Function form, which I just mentioned already to you. Function form is when an equation is solved for y. Okay? So if it's in 3x plus y equals 7 and it asks, is this function form? You would say no, because it doesn't say y equals. Okay? Here it says y equals negative 3x plus 7. That is function form. Okay? So if it asks you, yes, this is function form. But if there's anything with the y, a number in front of it being multiplied by it, a number that it's being divided by, a number being added or subtracted to it, it's not in function form. It has to have y by itself. I cannot graph it. Well, I can, but it's harder to graph when it's in this form. Very easy to graph when it's in this form because I plug something in for x and I know what my y is. Okay? So then it says, write x plus 2y equals 6 in function form, then graph the equation. Okay? So I'm going to take this equation, and I'm going to say x plus 2y equals 6. What do I need to do first to get this into function form? What, Carter? Yes, so how do I get rid of x? What do I have to do with x? You have to subtract x. Okay? So I'm going to get 2y equals negative x plus 6. Here's the deal. I want you to always put the x first. Okay? Because eventually later on it's going to make more sense if we have x first because you have to put it in that form eventually. So let's just practice it now. So I'm going to say negative x plus 6. Now how do I get y by itself from here? Divide by 2. So my equation says y equals negative, what's in front of that x? A 1. So if I can say negative 1/2 x. Does that make sense? And then what's 6 divided by 2?
3.
Okay, now I have an equation. Okay,
How come you put the half?
because what number is in front of x? 1. And what's negative 1 divided by 2? Negative half. Negative 0.5. So I put it as a half so you don't forget that that 1 is there. Okay? So if you're dividing something and it's just an x, remember there's always a 1 in front of it. So that you have a fraction now. 1/2, 1/3, 1/5, whatever it is. Okay? Now, from there, I can now graph. Okay? How do I graph stuff? What I tell you have to do? You have to make, well, a table. So let's make a table. Okay? What numbers am I going to plug into my table?
-2, -1,
Good.
0, 1.
-2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. We're going to make it easy. Let's plug these in. This is my x. This is my y. Okay. If I plug -2 into here, I have negative 1/2. I need more space. I have negative 1/2 times -2 plus 3. What's negative 1/2 times -2? First of all, you have a negative times a negative, so it's going to be a... Yeah, you can do it on the calculator. Yeah. Mm-mm.
2
Listen.
over 4, 1/2.
No. Stop. It's not hard. Technically, yes,
One.
it's a 1.
1.
It's 1 because 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. So I have 1 plus 3, which gives me what? So when I plug in -2, I get 4 out. Now, what's negative 1/2 times -1?
-0.5.
It's what? No, it's not. You have a negative times a negative, you get a positive.
Oh, I put negative.
So you get a 1/2 plus 3, which gives you what? What's a 1/2 plus 3? 3.5. 3.5. Okay, let's plug 0 in. I have negative 1/2 times 0 plus 3. What do you get? Well, negative 1/2. Yeah, I get 3. I get 3.
Did you really?
Okay.
I do
What's
have
negative 1/2 times 1 plus 3? What's negative 1/2 times 1? Negative 1/2. And what's negative 1/2 plus 3?
Oh,
Computer's gonna
I'm
use the bathroom now.
tripping. 3.
In a minute, Josh. What's negative half plus 3?
Negative 3.5.
No, it's not.
Positive 3.5.
You have a negative half and you have a positive 3. So it's basically the same as saying 3 minus a half.
2.5.
Oh.
2.5. Thank you.
What?
You guys, listen to me very closely about this. Because I know what your problem is going to
I
be.
just don't like using halves.
You cannot, your calculator does not read order of operations. If you do not use parentheses when you are doing this, you will get the wrong answer every time. Stop relying on your calculator for easy math. You know what a negative half plus 3 is. You can do that mentally. Start using your brains. Okay, now let's plug in 2. If I have negative half times 2 plus 3, what's negative half times 2? Negative 1. And what's negative 1 plus 3? 2.
Positive 2.
Now look, I have stuff I can graph. I go to negative 2, positive 4, right? I go to negative 1, 3.5.
So in the middle,
I go to 0, 3. Okay, now listen, mine's on a board, so it's kind of hard to work with. But if you have graph paper, I suggest you use graph paper. If you try to do this without graph paper, you're going to have a headache. It's going to be rough. Because if you do, you're going to need to use your ruler, and you're going to need to make everything out equally. Or it won't graph right. Use graph paper so that you have those little boxes to work with, okay? I will give you some for today, but you need to bring your own. 1, 2.5, and 2, 2. So here's this. Now from there, I have to come and get my straight edge, right? And I need to graph this. And you're going to pretend like this is perfect because I'm working on a whiteboard and it's hard to work on a whiteboard. And it goes forever, so you have arrows. Okay? Tomorrow, we will probably do a lot of the same stuff. Your homework is going to take you time tonight. You are going to show me a lot of work tonight. Okay?
Is that homework?
Yeah, your homework is on the board.